this is, I think, number 5 or 6 in our series. We've been doing a lot of these table talks on psychological safety. My name is Dr. Alessandria Plizzi. Everyone calls me Al, and I head up the company called Verdant Consulting. I also work with ISO, the International Standards Organization, on the ISO work for human resources. And I am the co-founder of a company called Kite HR, which focuses on the well-being of, and we've just started our HR well-being events and community as well. And I'm joined by Ben, who did a little bit of an introduction, but go ahead, Ben, if you don't mind.
I'll do it now for the recording for posterity's sake. So I am Ben Eubanks. I'm based down here in Huntsville, Alabama. So if you pick up a little Southern twang in there, that's where it's coming from. So I'm the Chief Research Officer for Lighthouse Research and Advisory. It is my job to keep track of all of the technology in the world that supports HR and recruiting and learning, but also the trends, best practices, what's happening in that space, and how employees feel, how employers are trying to solve problems. And so I spend my days trying to make sense of all that information, all that survey work we do, and all the research to help give advice, as Elsa and Anna would say, to do the next right thing for employers so they can make the decision on how to hire the next person or how to keep the next person.
That's awesome. So Ben is a great person to join me for this speed round, focusing on welcoming new employees. I posted recently on LinkedIn, following the great resignation comes the great integration, which is, what do we do with all the people that we're hiring, either to replace or change the dynamics of the organization? And so we're going to talk about that within the context of psychological safety. So again, what is psychological safety? It is essentially being able to take risks without fear of negative repercussion. And so there are 6 dimensions to it, focusing on, do I have the ability to be myself, take risks, disagree, raise problems, ask questions, and make mistakes? And oh boy, isn't that the life of a new hire, right? Is doing all those things. Maybe not sure about the be yourself because you just come off of an interview panel. And so you want to be what they want, right? You're trying to be both. And so psychological safety hits on a lot of these pieces as we think about bringing in new employees. So, well, I mentioned why now. We're in the midst of a big transition as employees leave and make new decisions, find new homes. That becomes really important. The other thing is that we're trying to welcome people who maybe have joined the company during the pandemic and have never worked in person. And so as what do you call that? That's not a new employee because we know them. But yet we're not used to the fact that they bring tuna fish for lunch every day, and that makes everybody mad. Or, wow, I didn't realize you were such a loud talker. So there's just things that happen when we move in with each other that we have to experience and address. Ben, anything I missed as you see trends on why now?
Goodness. Just to echo what you were saying there, I talked to so many CEOs in the last year that said, hey, we were growing still as a company, but all these new people that have started, I don't know who they are. I've never met them. I've never seen them. And so from a leadership perspective too, you feel disconnected. I know the employees we're talking about today they feel disconnected, but the leaders too at the same time. So they also want to feel some more tether, some more connection to those people that are coming on and joining, and they don't want them to feel like they're out on an island by themselves. But many times they're not quite sure how to do that. So that's why I'm so excited about this conversation today, because we'll give some good practical advice on how those leaders can do a better job of making their people feel like they're connected and supported in the right ways.
Awesome. So speaking of, why don't you share a little bit, you and I talked before our event today about what are the needs of a new employee as we think about their psychological safety?
Well, it's funny because when you and I scheduled this, here's the behind the curtains peek for everybody else. When you and I have planned on doing this, I didn't know that I was going to have it, but I have brand new data from 1,000 candidates we just interviewed or just finished some research on this week. So it's brand new. I never told anybody about this. And one of the questions we asked in there was, when you're starting a new job, what's most important to you? And so the first and foremost, is I just want to get up to speed on my responsibilities, the work I'm going to do, right? The things we hired you for, as you said a minute ago, right? I'm trying to be the thing that they want me to be, that they hired me to be. That's most important. But right behind that is I want to feel welcomed and appreciated by my direct manager. I want them to make me feel like I'm part of this thing, like they care that I'm here, not just that we're here as a team, but that I am here individually. And then right after that was connecting to their peers. So building that network, building that group around you where you can bounce ideas off of and you can have the fun conversation like we were having right when we started the recording today, back and forth, just feeling like there's a community around you where it's not just you trying to do all those things. Those were the top 3 things we found in this brand new research on what people are actually looking for when they come in the door. And a lot of those have to deal with how they feel. And it's hard to quantify that sometimes, but that's the essential piece of this whole concept of psychological safety is, do you feel safe, supported, all those kind of things.
Yeah. And so one of the things, here is, am I able to use the tools you hired me to do, right? So we hire people with a certain skill, and then do we enable them to actually use that skill in a way that's planful so that they feel like they're adding value?
Yeah.
Another one is asking questions. So when you said about that, that's really interesting on that study that you just shared, which is that connection to my manager. What does that have to do? How would that show up as a manager of a new hire? How would I want to think about that when it comes to my new employees' needs?
I think I have yet to start a job in my entire career history where I didn't meet with my manager and they tell me they have an open door policy, right? We've all heard that. That's a very common thing. But one of the things that I realized very early on is many of them mean that literally, like the door is open, but emotionally they're not open to any conversations. They're not open to questions. They don't want that. Okay, they're not comfortable with that. They maybe have to learn that skill or build that muscle. And so I think that's one of the key things that I would give some recommendations on is when people come in, they have questions. Yes, you hired them because you think they're qualified, but even if they are perfectly qualified, they still don't know maybe your process or, yeah, my last job did it this way, but how do you do it here? And some of those things, just nuances. And so they're hesitant to ask those questions. And so telling them, hey, we have an open door policy, but not just saying, hey, my door's open, but you come to me anytime, for anything, and there's not a question I'm going to laugh at you for or tell you that's a bad question because I want to make sure you're as enabled as you can be to do this job we brought you in for. That's a very different conversation than saying, yeah, the door's open. Ask me if you need something. And I think that's a critical part of this bigger picture of how you make someone feel comfortable. How would you feel, Al, right? If your manager said that versus, hey, the door's open, call me if you need me.
Yeah. And I would add to that and say, be proactive and don't wait for them to come to you with questions. Assume they will have them and make space for those questions to get asked. Rada.
Hey, I also wanted to add that what we had in the culture that we created coaching at my last organization, there was a little bit of an onboarding process with every employee so that very important things were addressed right away. Even how they brought them into the group with, the team, but also weekly one-on-ones. It's amazing when I've presented for other organizations, when people go, oh, your leaders meet with their associates weekly? And we said, yeah, they do. Now, if there's not much to talk about, you could always cut that short. You could always reschedule. But yes, there's a weekly one-on-one in addition to that open door policy, just to check in, to create that space for the associate, a safe space. If they want to talk about something, whether it's work related, personal related, it's not necessarily because you're doing something wrong and an actual update on things. It's more of, hey, let's connect. Let's get to know each other. Ben, you almost were like when I said that, you had
jumped out of my chair when you said
yes.
that.
Isn't that amazing?
So there's another company that I've run across in the research, Tata Consultancy Services. They're a huge business process outsourcing firm. But one of the things that you do when you start there, the first week on the job, your manager says, hey, what do you want to be next? Because in many companies, that's a weird conversation. And if in the first week of work you asked, hey, what's next for me? They'd say, be quiet, get back to work. We just hired you. But there, they start building that into every conversation. So that person's always thinking about what's next. And your manager is saying, I'm in your corner. I'm advocating for you. What can I do to make sure you're ready for what's next?
That's the goal. Yeah. And it could be, what do you want to be next? And at the same time, what's going to help you be successful now that also integrates into what's next. So it's a both and conversation. What a great way to start.
Yes.
Wow.
And I would say, don't always make these one-on-ones in the boss's office. Go to them, meet in their space, create comfort.
Take a walk.
Exactly. Take a walk, meet for coffee. And, don't always have it be come to me when you. Another one we talked about is making mistakes, right? So they say if you aren't making mistakes, it means you're not learning, right? Why is making mistakes important for new employees, you think, Ben?
So the research shows that the majority of how we learn as humans is experiential. We put our hands on it, we try it, we mess it up. That's how there's not a single child walking around that went through the PowerPoint slides on how to walk and then they were good at walking, right? They tried this and they failed. And the same thing applies when it comes to work. We get a chance to test out some of these things and push some boundaries a little bit. And you know what? A little bit of failure is not a bad thing. It helps steer you in the right direction, or it teaches us where those boundaries are, what those guardrails are. I'll tell you that I talked to a CEO recently, and in his role, he gets to see hundreds of companies that are doing really interesting things on the talent side. And so what separates those companies that are really killing it? They're doing a great job versus those that are a little more, laggards. And he said, when I look at every one of those across hundreds of companies, the biggest thing that seems to make the difference is the ones who are willing to iterate. They're willing to say, I'm not married to this one process or this one way of doing it, because the second we say that is the non-negotiable for us, this process is how we've always done it, we're never going to change that, you are limiting any future growth or success you can have. So I got some really good takeaways from that conversation, and it reminds me of how important it is to be willing to fail a little bit in order to succeed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And so giving that safety to make mistakes, assuming that mistakes will happen up front is an important part. Another thing here is about giving new employees the opportunity to feel heard and share their backgrounds and experiences, their point of view of what they see.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, the last HR role that I had, hands-on doing HR day-to-day, we had this thing called the Big Ideas Database. It's a very grandiose title. It was a SharePoint dumping ground for ideas. But the thing is, there wasn't a gate on it. Any employee could put any idea in there, and they were promised that it would be reviewed at the executive level. So they could put their things in there. If they had talked to their manager and it just never got anywhere, we'd at least give them consideration. And I'll tell you that people use that for things large and small. One of our engineers got us to put bigger garbage cans in the office because he was the person who took the trash out, and he hated doing it every day. So we put bigger garbage cans in there, so we did it like once a week. That was silly. But we had someone else who said, hey, you know what? Where we were selling the software, we could probably change that model up and we could license it and sell it for a subscription. And that became a multi-million-dollar line of business for the company, because she could raise her hand and say, I have an idea, and do it in a way that it wasn't frowned upon, or it wasn't gated, or it wasn't held back. So we saw some really amazing success from that, both large and small. And I think that's so critical, especially for new people, because they have a fresh set of eyes. They don't have that experience blindness of, I've been here for so long that I start narrowing my vision because I know all the boundaries and the parameters and the rules. That person doesn't know those things yet. So they're not limited by any of that.
That's right. And so one of the things I see, thank you for sharing that story. I love that story about the trash can. No, because it's great, because it's like, that makes a huge difference, right? It's like having to get up and walk out. I mean, it makes a big difference. And the thing that I notice is that we hire people because they're special and unique, and they bring this background, and we bring them in and we tell them throw all that away and just learn how we do it. So it's like the thing we actually hired you for, we no longer want you to add that value. And so that's just, it's like, buying a piece of equipment and then refusing to plug it in. So, I mean, you're just kind of having it take up space. It's not really delivering against the thing that you hired that person for. So we talked a lot about the new employee, but I want to talk about something that we rarely talk about, which is the existing team. So to create psychological safety, you can't just focus on the needs of the new employee. You need to also pay attention to what happens, the ripple effect that happens within the organization at large. And so the existing team reacts when new people join. And so I wanted to talk about creating psychological safety by looking at both parts of the equation. So onboarding is only one piece. That's why I called it the great integration, because it's about bringing people in and having them be better as a result, that cultural add. So, here we have those artifacts of culture, people who feel very proud of their culture. I've worked for organizations that had very, very strong cultures. And they sometimes it became kind of insular of the us versus them, the people who were here when, for 10 years, 15 years versus new people, and building that trust of are they really here? Do they really, because they care about our brand, or are they outsiders? It's like, the newly adopted puppy, right? So not sure about this is going to fit. So making sure that we're clear about what those icons of culture are, that are non-negotiable, but the ones that can also flex, right? So yes, we always used to go to this picnic and this place for this event, but maybe there's a new idea, maybe there's a new way to do things, and we can evolve and flex. This is big in M&A, right? When we have mergers and organizations coming together, you trying to bring those two cultures together and having them blend can be very, very complicated and bring up a lot of emotion. Ben, I see a lot of expression on your face.
I'm thinking, I've never thought of it that way. When the words you were using there, I'm thinking people talk about mergers like it's a marriage, but it's like the whole family's getting married to the whole family. It's not just one person, right? You're putting all of these variables together, and it's not as simple as X plus Y. It's 50 different variables.
It's like shuffling the cards together, right? So you need to get that blend of what are the cultural, so being clear about what are the non-negotiable cultural pieces that are integral to who you are versus the ones that can bend and flex are important. The other one is that a lot of times when new people come in, it seems like they're the bright new shiny toy, right? So, oh, such and so said, and such and so said, and the existing team is like, if I have to hear that statement one more time, I swear I'm gonna like throw my desk across the room. So be conscious of not over-indexing on the new employee, but looking at everyone together. Create opportunities for the new employee to build bonds and friendships with their peers and not be treated like the new shiny toy, but rather the addition to our organism, our team, because that can create dynamics in your team that you don't want. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
I say that having changed roles myself several times and been the new shiny toy, it doesn't feel good. So then the other thing is that for the existing team, they want to feel like everything they've done before stays. We're just building on, we're adding to, we're expanding. We're not looking to just throw away everything that's been done. And so bringing people along on new ideas, why we're adding this role, why we thought this person would help add to that ability to build the comfort with the existing team and the new people who join is part of creating the evolution and the journey. The next phase of great, as we used to say, add into it. Ben, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm thinking about, use the word comfort, and on one hand, I want to rebel against that a little bit, because when we're bringing these people in, we're to use, culture add, to use the phrase, we're bringing someone in that intentionally may make things a little more uncomfortable. Right, we want them to be comfortable sharing and open, right? As we're talking about in this bigger conversation.
Right. That was the wrong word, because
no. You want them to be comfortable to share, but we have to be comfortable that the things that are going to come out of their mouth are going to sound different and may grate on us a little bit, because that's not the way we've always done it. And so we want them to be comfortable to share, but we, as the existing team, we have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable pretty much.
Yeah, you called me out on that one. That one's a good one, because we really need to have fearless discomfort is what we need, right? So I can be uncomfortable, but I don't need to be afraid.
Okay, got it. I like that.
So that's what you see when you have psychological safety is I don't want to spend time in comfort, but I don't want to spend time in fear. So you're kind of in that quadrant of discomfort, fearless discomfort. The other thing is, I shared this with Ben because I've seen this one a lot, is we don't want to feel like we're completely changing direction because the new person has joined. So Ben, have you seen this in the companies that you've worked with?
Yes, and it kind of goes back a little bit to what I was just saying a minute ago, where we're committed to a direction. We may take a detour off now that you're here with us, because you're going to encourage us to look at things with some fresh eyes. You're going to encourage us to think about this maybe a little differently, but it probably won't change the fundamental direction we're going ultimately, but it may encourage us to have a better picture of what's happening. want to go in like 50 directions. One of the things you said a minute ago that I kind of cling to is I used to have managers that would say, hey, I've got a great team. We're going to hire someone. We're going to hire, Al and bring him into the team, and we'll have a great team plus Al. And I was always quick to remind them that you're building an entirely new and different team. There'll be different dynamics. There'll be different needs. There'll be different emotional tensions. Like all those things are going to change. You think it's just everything's perfect, and let's just put one more body in there because we need to have more, hours in the week to get things done. And it's not as simple as everything else staying constant. This isn't economics. This is humanity. So there's no all other things being constant. We'll just change one variable and it'll all be okay. So that's the other thing that you said earlier, that the shiny toy thing brought me back to that, because I think that's a thing that's leaders sometimes make a mistake on. And once you see that, you're like, yes, of course, obviously that makes sense. But in the midst of it, you're trying to make as few moments of rocking the boat as possible. But to your point just a minute ago, you should be just uncomfortable, but not afraid in this. And no person should be, hopefully. Even bring someone new onto the team. No one should be worried that person's coming in, that they're going to upset everything and change everything. That's not going to create a good relationship with that person if you're worried about those things. So there's a whole lot of things that the leader has to do in the middle of this to make that work well together. And that's why there's going to be work in this space for much time to come, I would say.
Yes. Well, especially as we make these transitions, right? Not just in the Great Resignation, but in anybody who was hired over the last 2 years. And, I was also sharing with Ben that I worked for a company once where we did an analysis that showed our average project was about 36 months. Our average tenure of project leaders was 24. So what ended up happening is every project got a new leader, and of course then it changed direction, or we had to go backwards and then go forwards, and it just ended up creating this change fatigue in the organization. Okay, so final 3 things I end with every time we talk about psychological safety, are the 3 pillars of psychological safety. One is making sure you look at the structure of your organization to ensure it's working for you and not against you. So look at the structure of meetings, of organizational structure, of our processes and how we get work done. Do they create safety? Again, that discomfort, the fearless discomfort for both new employees and existing, and look at that with fresh eyes. Also, is there anything in the environment that would cause disruption from a psychological safety perspective? Maybe there's issues in the supply chain. Maybe we have dependencies on parts of the world that are experiencing issues right now. So we need to look at the environmental impact on our employees and see if there's anything at play that would put more pressure on the ability to perform well together in this newly forming team. And then finally, expectations around behavior. So talking openly about the expectation of welcoming people in, learning from each other, being open, arguing about ideas and not people. And those tenets of psychological safety aren't just about how we behave, but definitely that's an important part. Okay, so last one, Ben, let's talk about considerations of living in this world, the hybrid world. Anything that people should think about when they think about both the new employees and the existing?
Oh, goodness. I'll say that the first thing that occurred to me when everybody started putting remote for the jobs that allowed that, the companies, the roles, the industries that allowed that, people started going remote. The first thing that occurred to me is there are many, many managers at that exact moment in time that had to stop using the crutch of someone showing up in the office and assuming they were safe and well taken care of and they were ready to work and they had all their stuff together. Right? They made all those assumptions when someone showed up that all that was taken care of and they were ready to accomplish whatever they had set out to accomplish. And when they could not see them physically anymore, and seeing them on Zoom is not quite the same, they suddenly had to rethink some of those things. I think in the bigger picture, long term, that will be helpful because we don't use that just as a crutch and assume and guess and hope. Like those aren't our strategies. So I think those sorts of pieces of this bigger puzzle are important to remember in this. From the perspective of the employee, though, they have to be comfortable raising their hand. And the research that I've seen says when you are virtual, it's a little bit harder to do that. There's a little more of a burden to do that than when you're just down the hall and you can poke your head in and say something. So to our discussion earlier on the open door thing, I'd say that's even more important, especially if they're remote or if they're hybrid, if they're not sitting there with you all the time, because you've got to go out of your way to make them feel completely comfortable with talking to you about those things. There's a company that I spoke with recently. Their head of clients of kind of delivery services, they have a team of recruiters. They're a recruiting company, and everybody else is losing recruiters left and right. They're getting huge offers right now. And she said, we haven't lost a single one. And so everybody in the call is like, what are you doing? What's your secret? She said, the secret is I'm spending time with every one of them. And she's like, that's not a secret. You know, no one everyone wants that secret pill or the one button push to fix this. She said, I'm just spending time with each of them, asking them what I can do for them. Sometimes it's just a commiseration on how hard things are right now, but they just want to feel like someone listens and cares. And every one of those are happening virtually on a Zoom call. But she said, it's saved us tens of thousands of dollars as a company. We haven't had to lose any of those great people. And all of them feel like they are truly listened to more so than any other part in their career. So there's some really important pieces to this. And I'd love to get your take on that, what you're thinking, what you're hearing from the companies you're talking to.
Yeah, well, so, one, I think a lot of companies are still trying to figure out what the future looks like from a workspace perspective and what that means from a culture. But from the research I wanted to share, I saw this fascinating study on our perception of relationships in relation to whether or not we feel heard and understood. So one, they showed that 91% of text messages where there was had misunderstandings. And so it was, and a lot of it was just, the verbiage. So they had examples after examples. The other piece that I thought was absolutely fascinating was when I feel heard, my opinion of our relationship improves. So I will see us as better as a team when I feel like you've heard me. And that was looking at all kinds of different relationships, workplace included. And so I think what you just said was giving people a space to feel heard, to feel like their opinion is valued. That's why we talk about psychological safety, because you can't have innovation, you can't have creativity, you can't have improvements and iteration if you can't ask questions, make mistakes, and raise your voice. So that's me on my soapbox. Okay, so that was Ben Eubanks. You can connect with him on LinkedIn. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. Ben, talk a little bit about HR Summer School.
Oh, goodness. See, I told you that I wouldn't do it justice. There's so much stuff that I forget about. So one of the fun things that I've had the opportunity to do, speaking of creating a safe space, by the way, I don't think we planned this together, but 2 years ago when the world turned upside down and everybody was sent home, I got sent home from a speaking excursion out in Long Beach, and I didn't get to speak because California was closed. And so as I was coming home, I was trying to think, what am I going to do? So I put together this event called HR Summer School, and it was really a way to give people not just a bunch of content and information, and there's plenty of that stuff out there. It was to give them some encouragement that we are doing noteworthy work as a community, and the impact of even one person in that is significant. And so we put together this event, and yes, there's education, there's credits and all the other fun stuff for people who care about HR and talent. But at the end of the day, my goal every time is to inspire someone else, to inspire them that, hey, this is the field for me and I can have an impact, or to inspire them to go out there and make a positive impact on the people they're serving, the candidates they're serving every day. So hrsummerschool.org, and that's the website. You can check that out if you want to learn more.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, Ben. And then let's see, my plug. Okay, psychological safety. So I created a website dedicated to psych safety. So it's verdictconsulting.net/psych safety. We also have, check out our other upcoming events. Next week, we're going to be talking about self-care for cultural change champions. And there are some oh my gosh, amazing people on that panel to talk about that work. We also are going to be doing in June for our Australasia friends. So Andrew, this is for you. In Australia and New Zealand time zoned HR Wellbeing Week. US and Canada can participate as well. The UK will be the middle of the night, but so that's our next HR Wellbeing Week with our focus on creating well-being for HR. And then psychological safety conversations continue. We've got one with Deb Best where we'll talk about using assessments like PI and DISC to help with create psychological safety by building trust and connection, but also some watch outs that can happen that both of us have seen. I have another one coming up in April on the emotional agility and psychological safety, also on the magic of change around psychological safety. And then we're doing a double feature on May 11th regarding conflict and mergers and acquisitions. So with that, I'll open up for any questions.
I would just like to say that I am still awake, and I thank you very much for that presentation. We are an accounting firm in New Zealand and with 20 staff, and we're going through some psychological safety sort of courses now for our current workplace, and we're also about to employ 3 new staff. So this was quite good to sort of probably get us ready for that transition that we're going to be doing in the next month. And it's going to be, you know, 3 new staff in a month, which we've got a pretty embedded culture with our previous staff. So there's definitely some good tips there.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Did have is how do you know, like I sit around the table with our leadership team, for example, and we talk about trust, but you can tell there isn't trust there, and people just try and dance around and not sort of address the situation. So how can you sort of know that there is actually trust there, and people are sort of being honest that they do trust that person across the table?
That's a great question. So trust is definitely the foundation for much of what we're talking about. And so the trust is, do we have the same conversations together that we have apart, is one way that I identify it. So do we speak the unspoken, or do we have separate conversations outside of the room? If we feel like we can have the conversation in the room that we would have outside of the room, then that's a definition for me of trust. Let's see. Ben's going to have to leave in a second, but so Andrew, I would start there. Also, if you haven't read The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, I highly recommend it. And then doing assessments is a great way to build trust and create connection, either strengths or PI or DISC. Those are all really good tools. And again, we're happy to talk to you about any of those. Ben, anything you want to add on trust?
I'll add one quick thing on that. So years ago, I took a role in HR at a company right after they had grown from 20 to 60 employees overnight. They had just won a new contract and acquired all these employees who came from another employer previously. And they had been mistreated and not cared for. And it was very apparent very early on. It was, every meeting they kind of did the sit back, arms crossed, waiting, just, I don't care what you say because I know who you really are, was the tone of things. And so it became my job to break through that. And my goodness, I spent 9 months doing this. And the way that I started was when we went up there and said, what things, if you could fix things, what would you fix? And so we got 2 or 3 ideas from every person. And I came back and consolidated all that. So when I went back up there the next time, I showed them the list. I said, these are the things you told me. I broke them down in these things. These are the top 3. And the top 2 we've already started addressing. Here's when they're going to be resolved. And we started building this circle of, when you need something from us, if it's at all possible, we will deliver on it. We will give that back to you because that is our job, to take care of you so you can take care of the customer. And it was not easy to rebuild that trust because it was not just a neutral thing, it was negative. And so that's the encouragement I give you, is have a little patience with it. but don't let up or don't lose hope that it's possible, because it definitely is.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
No,
you.
that's good. Yep.
Thanks for getting up so early.
No, I'll go back to bed now.
All right. Well, speaking of, thanks so much to everyone for joining. I hope to see you at future sessions. We'll be sharing this on LinkedIn, and feel free to share with your colleagues and friends. And with that, everybody, thanks again to Ben and to those who made the live session, and everybody take care. Stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to go put on phone. Bye.
Bye.
Leave. How do I leave? Okay.